we tend to get bogged down in these details, imagining it's a physiological experience, when in reality, the physiological components of addiction, whether it be drugs or alcohol, are usually remediated pretty much within a week to 2 weeks. The physical withdrawal symptoms are done. Nevertheless, when people get out, they still feel compelled to do these things. So we have to be careful when we talk about addiction, what we really mean. My point of view about this is that there are things that underlie people's vulnerabilities to be addicted. Some of it may be a genetic predisposition, but I think more of it tends to be an emotional vulnerability. Do people feel like they need to escape their life for long periods of time, and is the only way they can do it through drugs or alcohol or a game? But where it gets complicated is some things you can't go without. And when they talk about food addictions, for example, you can't go without eating. So there are ways that I think we're seeing the addiction model get stretched and tested. They did do some interesting comparisons of addictions in one study.
Are there any psychological issues that someone could have that would increase their chances to be enthralled or addicted, or whatever term we want to give for being, hooked, whether that be OCD, ADHD, some of the other psychological hindrances?
Well, I remember a colleague of mine in graduate school did an interesting study with kids that had ADHD, and one of the things that she noticed was that kids that had ADHD that she worked with played a lot of video games, and what the reason turned out to be was it stimulated their neurotransmitters, that it was something that was really interesting. And one of the things that we know about ADHD is the more interested someone is in an experience, the more it stimulates their neurotransmitters, which actually make it easier to pay attention. So folks with ADHD may in fact find that they find it easier to concentrate or easier to focus because they're playing video games when they're playing it. This doesn't translate well in terms of when you have to sit down and read a book, but a lot of education now is starting to turn away from saying, well, they need to be able to read a book, and start to look at what are some more stimulating ways we can educate people. And a real good example of that, if you think about Rosetta Stone or language training, that's actually working with the person's mind and the person's tendency to want to escape. I think escapism is a way of defending yourself psychologically, and we all do that, whether it's to go home and watch a good movie, or soak in a hot tub, or have a good meal and not think about your troubles, read a good book. Playing games is another way of doing that, and it can be more immersive because it's more immediate visually. The thing that is a little more concerning about visual escapism like that and like movies is that there's less user control. If you're reading a book, you get to imagine things and you're sort of able to monitor or censor your imagination. Whereas video games, what you see is what you get. So that I do think it's important that people that are younger and are still having a hard time making sense of the world, when they see a game like BioShock, which has got a lot of violence, or when they see Halo, there's nothing mediating their experience of that game. I think that people that feel an absence in their life often try to fix it or experience it in terms of playing a game. I think people that feel weak or disempowered often seek out a sense of being empowered, and you can see that in video games. And it can be both a good thing in terms of somebody that may be paraplegic and can experience themselves as powerful and heroic, but it can also be used as a way of getting people interested in and at an early age where they're impressionable and seeing life like it's a video game. I remember when I first was playing Ultima Online, which is a video game that has, as part of it, characters that will battle, and then they may die, but they get to get resurrected. And I remember I was playing this game and talking with someone who was playing the game from Iraq, who was stationed there. And I was thinking, what does it mean that this person is having this experience where they're getting this idea that you can die and get resurrected again? Is that a way of coping with being afraid that you're going to die? Or is it setting up a false sense of invulnerability, which could actually get you in trouble? Now, I don't have an answer for that. But I guess part of what I'm saying is, yes, they're powerful experiences, and yes, they can really impact your psyche for good or for not so good.
Is it only addiction when there's negative effects?
Well, I think that's sort of how I look at this. And if you asked different therapists, they might see things differently. I think there's two basic models of recovery from addiction. One is an abstinence model, where you just stop doing whatever it is. And then there's the harm reduction model, which is that you decrease the amount of whatever you're doing and decrease the amount of harm. One of the things that we've learned from the harm reduction model is to really get an assessment from the person about how they feel their life is going. If the person's not having any adverse effects, if they are happy with their social surroundings, if they have meaningful relationships, whether they're in-game and or whether they're not, if they're doing their work and if they're happy, then I'm not sure whether that is an addiction in terms of the quality of their life. I think of addiction as, does it take away or interfere with your life? Are you sleep deprived and having a harder time concentrating because you spent too much time raiding? Are you not eating properly because you're not taking time out to go or cook a meal or eat because you don't want to miss playing a game? Are you not talking to family or friends because you're busy playing a game? If your life is revolving around a video game or gaming to the extent that your world's getting smaller and your relationships are getting fewer and your self-care is getting worse, then I think it's more of what I would call an addiction. Let me disclose something, which is that I play games, and I'm definitely a technological-friendly and gamer-friendly therapist. In fact, I advertise myself that way. And the reason I do tell you that is so that you know I've got a bias. But I also know a lot of my colleagues don't necessarily play games or have never done that, and can be pretty dismissive of it. I've heard folks that I do workshops on this to say that when a person tells them, well, yeah, I play World of Warcraft, the therapist's response is to say, oh, I don't know anything about that, which isn't really communicating that they're ignorant about it as much as dismissing it as something they're not interested in. I think people do feel a sense of sadness when a game is ending. People become very attached to their characters or their avatars, and there's a lot of time that's taken up in a lot of these games to creating your avatar. And the idea is that you create a figure in this world that you really resonate with. So it speaks to a level to a person's capacity for attachment and imagination that they can invest so much in these characters. So when these characters come to the end of their journey in game, people can feel very frustrated. People can feel very sad. They can want to try to start the game over again. If somebody is trying to stop using a game entirely, they often experience a sense of loss of control and a sense of irritability, an emptiness in their life, that they've realized that they've been spending a lot of time online and they don't know quite what to do with themselves. Some folks who rely a lot socially on people in the game may suddenly find themselves really lonely and not quite sure how to start going about meeting people. And some people may feel like they can't deal with this on their own in terms of maintaining discipline, in terms of discontinuing their use or cutting it down. So they may give away their passwords or ask family or friends to reset passwords, but then get really frustrated because now they don't know what their password is. So I think the things you see most are frustration, sadness, and loneliness, but also the emergence of feelings that were probably there before, that were being coped with by using the game to extremes.